This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd Neiman.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again to another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Got another great guest for you. He's got a lot of parks in the Florida region, so it'll be interesting to hear his take on that. We don't have a lot of clients and buyers and guests here that do Florida as their primary market, so I'm eager to hear more about it. Please help me welcome my guest, Nick Yale. Nick, thanks for coming on, man.
Oh, thank you, Ferd.
Yeah, well, good. Well, tell us your background and tell us how you got into MH, and I'm curious to hear more about your ability to consolidate a number of parks in one kind of tight geographic region, which has a lot of benefits. The biggest con is it's sometimes hard to pull off. So
Right.
I'm eager to hear how you've been able to do it.
Yeah, well, thanks. So we started looking for mobile home parks in the middle of 2020, and we closed on our first deal. It was a 44 unit, 55 plus park here in Florida in the beginning of 2021. Since then, we've acquired 10 parks total. We've sold one. Our smallest currently is 27, and our largest is a 67. So we're kind of in the, I guess, medium size range. We really like RV, which has been something we've been focusing on for the last 2 months. Is these long-term RV parks. We self-manage all of our own properties. We do our management in-house, and we try to use tech as much as we can.
Okay, great. So tell me more about you. You like RV because there's a lot of people who jumped into MH for all the pros of what we all know about the benefits of MH compared to, say, multifamily apartments. And more people are jumping in the RV space in part because MH has gotten so competitive. RV has its own competitiveness too. But tell me kind of why you prefer that model or why you've gone in that route.
Well, the reason mainly being is we found that there's a little bit less competition on the front end when we're looking for them. I think a lot of mom and pops owners of RV parks, I think they get burned out maybe faster than the mobile home parks because even though we buy long-term parks, there's still some transiency. They're still a bit harder to manage. But what we really like about them, besides that operationally, is they're a lot less regulated here in Florida from a landlord-tenant standpoint, such as we can increase our rents more than once a year. If the tenant is in our park less than 6 months, we can evict them with a 24-hour ejection notice, essentially. Now,
that sounds great.
Yeah, now we've had issues where the sheriff won't actually enforce it, but usually they will. So we like that flexibility. But also what we found is that they really, at least the ones that we buy, these true long-term RV parks in these good Florida markets, our revenue doesn't fluctuate very much. I mean, some of our rent rolls, they might deviate on these less than 5% per month, which might not be too different than a mobile home park in that same market. So we found that, they're very similar in terms of how we can manage them. And they've been a little bit easier to acquire. And they do require more management oversight as well. Like sometimes, we might need to use a management software like Campspot in conjunction with Rent Manager if we're buying one that isn't, where occupancy isn't high in the beginning. We have some that we run on both of those platforms. But I would say those are probably the biggest things that we like about it. Is really it's that landlord tenant flexibility that we have, and the fact that we stay pretty full.
Okay, now tell me how Campspot enhances that, because I'm familiar with that program. I don't have it myself. I don't have much RV. My RV is basically just sprinkled in with my MH. But I know that there's dynamic pricing and other hospitality-esque features that some of the regular property management services don't have as well.
Yeah, exactly. So what we like about Campspot is that Campspot has a marketplace that's kind of like Airbnb. So it actually generates a lot of traffic from that marketplace. So, we have a park that we recently bought in Ocala. It was 67 lots. About half of those were occupied with true long-term residents when we took over the park. But the other half, we've implemented Campspot to help get that occupancy up. And so far, we're doing about, out of that park, maybe 25 to 30% of the revenue today on a monthly basis is actually coming from those Campspot people, which is it's those short-term stays that Campspot brings. And a lot of them, they end up converting to long-term stays because it gives us that exposure. We're just able to reach more people because from a advertising standpoint, we're not really doing very much. We just have a Google pin, we have a good website, and we answer the phone. So Campspot kind of gives us that extra market exposure. It is kind of it's a bit more of a complicated software. I think it's a bit more clunky. It's not as slick as Rent Manager in terms of the reporting, and the manager has to be trained on how to use both softwares in conjunction with each other to avoid, you can't have double bookings and stuff like that, which can happen.
Sure.
But Campspot, we've kind of been using it as a tool where once this park hits, near 90% occupancy on the true long-termers, we're just going to turn Campspot off. So I think we use it maybe a little bit differently.
Okay. That's interesting. So you basically are allowing short-term rentals, but for two reasons. One is, short-term cash, but second is with the goal of converting them into long-term.
Exactly. Yeah. Because from a management standpoint, that's really how we want to be, because these parks, the size range that we're buying, probably an average 50 lots, we can't really support, really quality staff to be able to manage lots of short-term, and activities and stuff like that you'd have in a traditional campground. So yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a common challenge with running a campground RV is you got to have either amenities or you got to have, regular on-site staff to monitor some of these things. And, small properties, MH is no different. A small site count, the challenge is, I can't afford a $50,000-$60,000 manager. I can afford a $20,000 manager, but it's hard to find a competent person for $20,000 a year.
Right.
So that's where consolidation in one general region can help because they can share numerous properties. So how have you been able to do that? I know you've got, quite a few of your properties are within an hour's drive. So how are you able to find those in such a, short radius?
It's really been from an acquisitions perspective, we've tried to be really targeted in terms of the list that we have and the owners and the kind of properties that we want to buy. We take more of like a sniper approach versus like a shotgun or whatever, so what we've done is after we acquired the first one, we just immediately started databasing very heavily the parks that are within an hour away from that one. And that way, when we call those owners, it's a much easier phone call. Being somebody that owns in that market, a lot of times these owners, as they live, in the park, or they might live nearby in a lot of cases. So we've kind of used it as a tool to been able to build rapport with them. And we do a lot of, aggressive off-market marketing. We do a ton of cold calling. We send out mailers every quarter, and we talk to brokers, of course, but it's really been just building a relationship with these owners just one at a time. And it was great. Like on one of our recent acquisitions, we were able to meet the owner at our other park, which is only 10 minutes away, in the clubhouse, and just that just builds huge amounts of credibility with them. And then
Sure.
That's kind of how we've been able to do it, just really aggressively focusing on those areas.
Okay, now that makes sense. So what would you say of your marketing tactics? I mean, obviously, if you can get them on site, that helps a lot from rapport, but cold calls versus postcards versus other tactics, what do you think is most successful?
Yeah, most successful for us has definitely been the cold calling. Including our storage facilities, we've acquired, I think, 15 or 16 properties. About 25% of them have came from direct mail. So we do really like the direct mail because, once you build out the list, it's not that hard to just, enhance your letter and then keep on sending it out. And it does generate those inbound calls, but it's really been just the cold calling. That's been the big one for us. I used to do it in the beginning. Now my partner, Simone, does it, and she does an amazing job at it. And that's been how we've been able to source about 90% of our deals.
Okay, so you guys are cold calling yourselves. Actually, instead of using a VA, you're going straight from the first tranche yourself, first shot.
Exactly. And I think the reason why we're doing that is because we have that really targeted approach right now. So we wouldn't want to waste a valuable lead on a park that's maybe 20 minutes away from one of ours on a VA introduction. Because maybe I think our strategy is just a little bit different than some, maybe somebody else's. So we're actually doing those calls ourselves. I mean, there's probably going to be a point where that just isn't scalable anymore, but at least for now and kind of what we're doing today, it's definitely working.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely gonna be more effective than a VA. It's just you can't make 5 phone calls at once. You can't make 1,000 phone calls a day.
Right.
So some people choose to go the shotgun approach, and it works for them, and some people choose to do the more targeted approach. And can work as well, obviously.
Exactly.
So what about parks that you have that are hybrid MHRV? How do those work together? Or do you basically just treat your RVs as if they're MH?
So what we love about about the hybrid parks is it kind of allows us to fall into the RV park classification of laws as opposed to the MH classification here in Florida. So even though we have mobile homes in them, as long as we keep them below a certain percentage, then we become regulated like RVs. And in those, yeah, we treat the RVs almost just like mobile homes. They're all long term. They're there on an annual basis. And generally we have two different rent levels. Usually we actually price the RVs a little bit higher than the mobile homes. But yeah, I would say, yeah, we have out of our hybrid parks, we have three of them that are usually about third MH, and then the other 2/3 have been RV. So, and in some cases our plan is to slowly bring in park models and just to make them more permanent, mainly we think that's going to help us obtain maybe better financing down the road. Should we fill them up 90% plus with park models, maybe we can get some sort of agency financing on the back end. So we've slowly been doing that at a couple parks. But yeah, we really like the hybrids a lot.
Yeah, the MH is definitely going to be more helpful in the financing because RVs obviously it can be by nature mobile, where the mobile homes don't seem to be. So that's interesting. You kind of have the best of both worlds in those hybrids, where you've got the lower regulation via RV, but you're treating the RVs like MH. So you're making the RV residents put the utilities in their name and everything, just like a long-term MH renter.
If it's a park where the electricity can be direct billed, which we have some where it's like that with RVs, where they actually do set up with the power company, that's our favorite. But we can run pretty lean from the expense side there. But most of them are not there, where we have our own meters, and we bill back electric, water, and sewer. Yep.
Okay, got it. So interesting. How are you able to get better rent on the RV? Is it just because of the competitiveness in the market? Because those people obviously are more flexible, where they can drive down the street. That's kind of surprising, unless it's just supply and demand.
Yeah, I think it's just supply and demand, just because there's kind of, even though our model is annual stays, come the winter season, most RV parks in Florida that cater to that, they generally start increasing their rents quite a bit. So in general, I think maybe because the tenant doesn't have to make the investment into into actually buying a mobile home, you can kind of price it a little bit higher. Though we've been playing with the idea of being higher on the mobile home side, since those can't really move as easily, and maybe being lower on the RV side. But thankfully, I mean, at least in our markets where the demand is high enough on the RV side, we've priced the RVs higher.
Got it. Okay. No, good stuff. So what other lessons can you share about whether about Florida or about the hybrid? Because that's a unique niche to be able to do the hybrid in one general location. So I'm just curious, other tips for our listeners.
Yeah, I would say maybe if you're MH focused, I mean, definitely open up to RV as well. I mean, just be very selective about it, because I think that the traditional RV park is definitely not like the kind that we buy, but the ones that we buy and that you'll come across, they really do operate very similarly to a mobile home park. I mean, you'll find residents who've been in there for 10-20 years. And like I said earlier, the revenues will fluctuate minimally. And you can do things to make those RV sites more permanent. If you're kind of concerned about the transient aspect of it, you can require the residents to install skirting on their homes, or you could bring in park models, and those are going to be tied down, kind of basically just a small mobile home. And so I would say, if you're really strongly focused on MH, I would probably still consider selectively opening up to RV as well.
Okay. Now, RVs are naturally going to be smaller than mobile homes. So I mean, are most of your parks senior only, or individuals versus families? I feel like it's hard to have a family of 5 in an RV, whereas that's standard in a mobile home.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, we have one RV park that's entirely 55 plus, but all the other ones are all ages. I mean, I guess just in general, the majority of the demographic who's living in an RV full time is not a family. But a lot of times it is younger people. So we do like to keep them all ages. That way, we can be open to more customers.
Sure.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah, no, that's kind of our method too, is just be open to all ages, have more customers. And we've got a couple parks that are almost all seniors, but that's just kind of the
Yep.
nature of what they've become. They're not designated as 55 plus, and we're
Right.
open to others. We even put a playground in, things like that. So
Yeah, and I think because we have some mobile home parks and we have one RV park that's 55 plus, and then we have some that are all ages. I think with the 55 plus, I think sometimes it can, I mean, I think it's a different set of problems that you get from those residents versus the families. With the 55 plus, we get a lot more scrutiny in terms of, are we doing things the right way as far as, legal paperwork and stuff like that. We get more complaints if the grass isn't mowed properly, that kind of thing, versus, but with the families, we get, somebody bringing in, 5 guests that end up becoming, our new residents in the matter of a month, or you get, a bunch of cars that are parked on a lot, basically halfway in the street. So, but my concern with the senior parks long-term is the sensitivity towards the rent increases.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that'd be probably a common, stereotype, if you will, on the 55 plus, is that they have more free time, so they're more nitpicky on
Right.
yards and conditions. The pro is they probably take care of their yards better. The con
Yeah.
is if you don't take care of the common areas, they're in your kitchen.
Yeah,
And
right.
then I've had that happen too. I think they actually read the lease, where a lot of
Yeah,
people,
right.
I'm like, I don't know if they actually read this,
Sure.
older people tend to read it. In Florida too, a lot of the parks, the older people are pretty affluent and,
Yep.
well educated, and they vote, which is part of the reason there's a lot of
Yep.
restrictions on MH within the state of Florida.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, good. So what would you say we want some of the, key lessons learned as you've, from your first park to today, or maybe a mistake made that you won't make the next time?
Yeah, I would say, try to get your technology right from the beginning. I mean, even in your first park, and theoretically you could run it, with a Google spreadsheet, but that's not really going to scale very well going forward. So, do things from that perspective from the beginning. So set up Rent Manager right away if that's your software of choice. Definitely implement and mandate online payments if you can in your state. Even from a phone system standpoint, don't use your cell number. In the beginning, we were using Grasshopper, which is not where it just, we had to recently stop using it. It just wasn't working well. Now we switched to GoToConnect, which is, I think they're owned by the same company, but they're more sophisticated. We started using that right away. So I would say, kind of get your technology right from the beginning so that you can scale with it. Also, maybe a mistake that I made is, I didn't hire a regional manager soon enough. So I was spending, so many hours a day just on the phone with on-site managers constantly. And it just wasn't scalable at all. And now that we have consolidated, most of our parks in one area, we hired a regional manager, and that's really helped free up a lot of my time. And she does a much better job than I do at implementing a lot of the operational things that I wanted to do, but just didn't have the time to.
That's good stuff. So I actually was in a meeting earlier today where somebody was talking about GoToConnect versus Grasshopper. What's the key? We've used Grasshopper. I always say I haven't had a problem with it, but I don't know what I'm missing, right? What is the key feature with GoTo that's better?
Because Simone, she handles most of our tech, so I don't know the specific key features that are better, but the biggest error that was happening with Grasshopper is we had 15 or 16 Grasshopper phone numbers, and they were always forwarding to the wrong numbers. They would forward to the manager at our park in Alabama instead of the one in Ocala, or they would forward to my phone because I was set up on the account somewhere. So we kept getting every day calls that were getting crossed across our different properties. And now with GoToConnect, that just isn't happening, which I don't know why, because it's, I'm sure they have some overlap being that they're owned by the same company. I think with GoTo, it also records the calls as well. I think maybe Grasshopper does that too, but I know there was a few other features that we preferred over it, but really it was because our calls just kept getting crossed. It was really screwing us up.
Okay, got it. Any other tech platforms you recommend as far as, project management, time cards, anything like that, besides property management and phone?
Yeah, I would say a recent implementation, maybe over the last 6 months, has been Monday.com. And that has completely just changed our operations. because before, each manager would have different tasks that would come up on a daily or weekly basis. And I would simply text it to them or email it to them. And of course they would never get done because, we all get hundreds of texts and emails a day. And so now with Monday, we put it on the board, it's tracked, they can mark when it's done, I can check in, they can submit photos. So that has completely changed our operations, just having a Monday board for every property and then having that categorized a bit further. That's been really good. Something we're doing now with rent managers, we're setting up automatic email reminders. So when people are late, they're now getting hit with multiple emails, and we haven't set up the text yet, which I think requires some other integration, which we're going to look into. But I think that's going to help a lot, as far as just different, as far as just creating more touch points with our residents, letting them know that, hey, it's you have a balance, please reach out to us, and kind of that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, we use some of those same tools. They're definitely helpful. It's just, I'm kind of a dinosaur. I feel like at times I'm like, oh, I'm content with what I've got. And then somebody will have a new shiny object, like, okay, let's look at a demo. Okay, let's try it. And it's like, it always seems to be a little bit better. I remember when I was resistant to Microsoft Teams. I'm like, oh, I already have OneDrive. I already have Google Drive. I already have Zoom. I already have Dropbox. And it's like, no, let's try Teams. Oh, now it's like, man, can't live without it. And then it's like, yeah, money.com. Great stuff, and different integrations with different softwares. It's like, it really does make life easier once you get all the kinks worked out and get the training done on it.
Yeah, and I heard you mention in another podcast, I think it was something that you saw at a home show where or maybe one of the MH shows, where they were using virtual assistants to help field inbound calls, I think, and maintenance requests. I think that'd be pretty cool, because sometimes the on-site managers are not the best at getting back to people.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Pros and cons, and recording the calls or tracking the calls in Grasshopper, for example, can help monitor some of that. And we do the occasional secret shopper.
Sure.
We'll send calls and emails to our managers anonymously or through code name, and then see how they respond. And then because we had to put it together like an email etiquette policy, which I thought was just common sense. You're 18 years old, you're an adult, you know how to do these things. But it's like, no. I mean, I remember a simple example was, we sent the manager a request, hey, I'm looking for a trailer in your court, do you have anything? And they should say, we have several manufactured homes available, or thank you for reaching out, Nick, we do not currently have anything available, but we do have a 3-bed 2-bath coming open at the end of the month. Would you like to schedule an appointment? Or what are you specifically looking for? Instead, the manager just responded, nope. That was it. Just said nope. Like, what? Didn't track the lead, didn't call him, didn't email him, didn't use polite language, etc. So it's like, okay, you gotta do a little better than that. So we had to make a policy out of it. It's like, I feel like almost everything we do, it's like, okay, time for another policy. And it's like, good grief. You get, at some point, it's like, you just say, brush your teeth. You don't have to say, like, find toothpaste. Wait, open drawer, find toothpaste, pick up toothpaste, unscrew cap. So it's kind of a difficult balance between how much do you, big brother micromanage everything versus just let people, run with stuff. And we've done push and pull on in modification 100 times, and we don't have it all figured out at this point. But it's like, trial and error. Occasionally you find something like, that's a better method, we should do that, or that's a better tool, we should use that. And then it's, as soon as we get used to one, it's like, well, maybe we should try something different.
Sure, right.
Continual learning curve, that's for sure.
Yep. Email etiquette. I'm gonna write that one down. So
it's just, I was surprised that I needed to write it down, or needed to implement it. But it was like, geez, basic stuff. And just people come, especially a lot of the park greeters or park managers, they have different backgrounds. Some of them have never had strong education. Some of them never had a office job. So attaching a document to an email, we have a greeter that we said, hey, they're gonna bring you a cashier's check for this new home they're buying. They don't want to get a loan, they got the money, they're gonna bring you a $12,000 cashier's check. Here is the exact address to mail it to. Send it via this service through FedEx with tracking, send the receipt, and scan and email us a copy of the X number of pages of the contract, the bill of sale, and the cashier's check. And then we get the FedEx, and it went through UPS with no tracking, 10-day instead of overnight or whatever, and it shows up, and inside is a photocopy of a cashier's check and a photocopy of the title.
Nice.
To which we said, "Where's the real title?" "Well, we're holding on to it." Like, "No, you're supposed to give that to the buyer." And then, "Where's the cashier's check?" "Well, I'm holding on to it. I didn't want to mail it. What if it would have got lost?"
Right.
And we're like, "How are we going to cash it back at accounting if you're holding it?" They're like, "I didn't think about that." And then we get a copy of the contract, and it is, 9 pages of photos from a flip phone,
Sure.
all on it, all in an email. So it's like, okay, we need some basic training on some of these things. And that's just the challenge with new staff. And, some staff is, lower skilled, and
Yep.
you got to try to make do. But yeah, we've just unfortunately had to learn, what needs to be trained on. And we used to ask people, like, "What do you want to be trained on?" And it didn't go very well, because they
Hmm.
don't they don't know, they don't know. So, like, here's required training, and here's remedial training. Monday.com, for example, was a huge challenge for some of our construction folks and property managers to get up to speed on. So we had daily, quote, optional training from
Wow.
8 to 9 a.m. every day for like 3 weeks. And I said, "You don't have to go in the training, but if you don't know how to use it right and you're not in the training, that's a problem." So some people went to the training every day. Some people went twice, and they're like, "This is easy. I got it." And they moved on. So that's kind of how we've tried to get through some of those challenges, is optional training and required training, depending on the task and the person.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Because yeah, that was definitely a challenge for us too. Because like you said, some of the on-site managers, park greeters, they're not the most tech savvy. And now before it would be me having to go and train them over Zoom or whatever, or in person, because I live only an hour away from most of our properties. But now with the regional manager, now that's her job, is to make sure that they're trained on the tech. So that's been good. But Fred, I have a question for you. Why do you do, or I think you do some park owned home rentals? What is the reason for that?
Well, I mean, in general, it's easier to rent a home than sell a home. So I'm willing to rent some, but I look at it judiciously based on the property. So, for example, I have a small park in Des Moines, and it came with 5 vacant park-owned homes. We don't have a full-time manager in Des Moines. We can't afford a full-time manager in that property. We don't have a local maintenance person. So we said we don't want to be in the home business in Des Moines, and we would if we had a 200 site park or even a 70 site park. This is a 20 site park. Came with
Right.
5 vacant homes. So for those, we said for sale only, and we got a ton of people who wanted to rent them, and we said for sale only. And instead of renting them in a day, we sold them in a month. But we got them all sold. And if somebody sells us a home, or we get an eviction or something, and we end up getting their home, it's for sale only.
Sure.
Other markets, like in Kansas City, I have local management, I have local maintenance. Well, I was like, the park came with 20 park-owned homes. I'm like, well, I had to bring in one park particular, I had to bring in 60 homes. I was like, well, I can rent 60 faster than I can sell them, but I can't rent all 60. I got to keep, this park is 93 spaces, so I had to keep it below, I think, 32. It was 32 was my max in order to get an agency refi at 35% park-owned homes. So I allowed myself and my manager to basically rent one, sell two, rent one, sell two. They brought them in, being cognizant of those agency thresholds. And then double wides are much nicer. Everybody wants a double wide. So the double wides were for sale only, because I could rent them in a minute, but I had to get them sold. And then I had other homes that were, just because of that lot, it was 14 by 56. Well, that's a tougher house than the 1676. Tougher house to move. So on that home, like, all right, I'll let you rent that one.
Hmm.
Now, from a financial standpoint, obviously more top line revenue on the park owned home rentals, but certainly more expenses and more management, and more maintenance. In a perfect world, I think I'd have no rental houses. But in order to infill in a sizable amounts, I got to get homes in. If I got to get the homes in, I got to lease them up. And some people like the park and home model. I mean, I think it's actually a growing portion of the industry. I just sold the park, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, and we had a pretty good percentage of rentals. I mean, out of 30 or so, this was like 30 occupied out of 36, or 32 out of 36. I think we probably had 12 or 15 rentals. So pretty good percentage, but it's like, it's hard to get it down to zero. And unless you're on, especially on infill, unless you're going to take a bath on some of the homes, depends on the market, right? But, so I've had some parks where I've done no rentals. I don't have any that are all rentals, but that's kind of why is to get occupancy faster. We then try to convert them. We price them as a rental more expensive than if they could buy them. So people are incentivized to buy them. But in one state, I'm only allowed to do a security deposit of 1x, but all my other states, I'm allowed to do security deposit of at least 2x. So we require a 2x security deposit on every rental, which gives you some nice cover. And it also screens people a little better, and it makes it harder to rent, which makes it easier to sell. So it's like, look, if you're going to rent this house for $1,000 a month, it's going to cost $3,000 to get in the door. How about you put down $3,800? You buy it, you save $100 a month and build equity. So that's kind of how we tackle it. Everybody has their own methods. I don't know that mine's the best. That's just kind of, to your question, that's kind of why we went that route.
Got it.
I don't have any RVs that we rent. We've had some parks that had RVs and we just sell those. But I don't have very many RVs. I don't know. I mean, I have the whole portfolio. I probably have 20 or probably not even that, so not very many. Over 1,000 sites, so a very small percentage.
Yeah. For us on the parks that we've bought that have park-owned homes, because they've just been really old housing stock. I mean, 50s to 80s, and these are just older Florida parks. Our lots, could not fit a 16 by 76 ever. Our intent, and because our lot rents are high enough here in the markets that we're in, and from a management standpoint, we've elected to try to have 0 park-owned homes. I'm sure if we had to bring in 60 like you did into one park, maybe it'd be a little bit different.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I have 2 parks in central Missouri that are right down the street. And those parks, I bought them. They're like one's 47 and one's 48, and they were both about 25 to 27 occupied. So, and they were all tenant-owned homes pretty much. So on those, I can bring in the homes. We got them both about full at this point. I can rent a higher percentage because I'll still be under my agency threshold. So that's part of, for me, part of my goal was get the park to agency ready as soon as possible. And that means renting some of them. And that means just being cognizant of that ratio. So in those 2 parks, because I had a good starting point of, 0 out of 26 park-owned home, I can rent quite a few of the last 21 in order to at each park in order to get them there. And agency typically wants 50 sites, but in that case, I got 2 in the same ownership group, same management group, and within, I think the threshold was at one point a mile, then 3 miles. Mine are both within that threshold, so they can be financed as a scattered site, and I can come under the 50 threshold and still qualify, because together they're 95.
Right. Yeah, from infill standpoint, we haven't done too much infill, but the parks where we have done, it's basically been used HUD approved park models, because that's the only type of house that would fit on most of our lots, because the homes are so old, and with setbacks, and the parks are so old. And so generally there's always 1 bedroom. So we don't get too many families, even in our family parks that are moving in.
Got it. How are you able to sell the park models at a profit in that market?
No, we're generally losing money on every home sale. I guess it's just the name. I mean, we'll try to recapture some of it. Say the home cost us $30,000, between setup, transport, and to renovate it. We might get a cash buyer in at $20,000, and then we'll finance that other 10, just to try to recapture some of it, build some additional income. But we seldom ever make money on a home sale, unfortunately. Maybe if we had a financing program, that was partnered with us, maybe it'd be a little bit different. But as of now, we're just trying to move them as quickly as possible, at least in the parks where we are using this strategy.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple park models come through, and I'm just not a big fan of them. If you have a big lot, if you got small lots, you got to do what you got to do. I'm not a big fan of them because they're so expensive relative to square footage. It's like, I don't know.
Yep.
I don't think I could sell them for a profit
Right.
anywhere. It's hard enough selling, a 76 footer at a profit in a lot of markets. So that's why I try to get, so for me, I'd rather have a 95 home that's 70 feet than a 2020 that's 48 feet. And then
Right.
obviously the 90s home also, a lot of those park models, if you get a new one, they're more expensive than a lot of the new
Yep.
bigger homes. It's just they're nice, but I mean, I had one lot in St. Charles, Missouri. I only had 40 feet of room, and it was high dollar market, nice park, and it was the last lot I had to get to 100% occupancy. So I really wanted to get it full. The site was worth about 85,000 a site in that market, and I was going to sell the park. So I was like, man, if I could find a dang home, I got an extra 80,000. And we looked everywhere for a 40 footer, and it was so hard. Finally found a used 40 footer after like 500 leads. It was crazy, and it squeezed it in there, and then got it and sold the park, shortly thereafter. But I was about to have to cave and buy a park model, but it was going to be like $90,000 for the dang home. It was like, I ended up finding one for like 38. It was probably worth 30, but found one for 38, got it in there for all in for 50 or whatever, and it was in good shape.
Nice. Yeah, I think here in Florida, we're able to find just a ton of used park models. I think because there's just so many RV parks here that have them in there because people like having park models in RV parks because it's a nice winter home for snowbirds. So we got lucky on a park that we bought last year that we've been infilling homes. We were able to buy 10 park models out of one park that was in South Florida, where they were
Nice.
the owner of this park. It was an RV park, but he wanted all the permanent units, all the park models gone. He just wanted only units that could be transient. I guess that was his business model. He was very close to the beach. So we got 10 out of one park, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. All right, man. Well, Nick, any other thoughts you want to share, tips before we go? And if not, how can people find you?
Yeah, I think it's a great industry. Definitely, if you're focused on MH, which we certainly are, maybe open up to RV as well. Don't be afraid to make cold calls and send out direct mails. Start building your list right away. Our website is libertycapgroup.com. My email is nick@libertycapgroup.com, or you can text me at 813-504-4395.
All right, man. Well, Nick, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Ferd.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.